Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Tess.
Great, good. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the special meeting of the State Street Advisory Committee, September 22nd, 2021. A lot of faces along that top row there in that regard. We're going to have a roll call, but I'm going to actually do a little bit different here because I don't want to do this twice. I want to do a little Rorschach test for myself. So when you basically say, yes, you're present, I want you to give me just a short 3 to 5 or 10 word description of a quality or characteristic, particular activity, or place in downtown that you really love. So my example would be, I'm going to say Dave Davis, present. I really love the sense of place of downtown. When you're there, the ambiance says, I'm in Santa Barbara. That's my example. Okay, so you want to call the roll, Greta?
Oh, Dave, yes. We have member Black, who I believe is absent at this time.
Correct.
Member Blackerby.
Present, and I love all the trees.
Huh?
Member Durling.
Present, and a very dry martini, 3 olives inside Jimmy's Oriental Gardens.
Yes.
Member Ehrman.
Present. I love the live music. It's downtown.
Member Elander.
Present. I love sitting outside at the courthouse and just kind of hearing the breeze and seeing the atmosphere.
Member Lewis.
He's absent.
Member Miller.
Present, and I love the individuality of the parklets, especially at night with the twinkle lights.
Wow.
Member Tejada.
Present. I really love downtown. I used to live down there, and I really liked how it was easy to walk around and get to different places.
Member Becker.
He's going to be late to the meeting.
Member Caffarelli. I believe. Oh,
I think you're
Pardon me.
muted, Marge.
Yes, you're muted.
Sorry, they're present. I love the Santa Barbara Public Market, but I also really love being able to walk everywhere. I'm a big walker, and being able to do everything I need to do downtown.
And I believe Member Bonderson is absent. Member Lenvik.
Lenvik is here, and my love of downtown was the old world atmosphere, which we had prior to the parklets being so wildly constructed. I hope we can get back to that atmosphere in the future. Thank you.
I believe Member Gutierrez is absent. Member Harmon, please.
Here, thank you so much. Well, my favorite moments on State Street, and apologies, I don't have video today, everyone, are walking down State Street at sunset and just seeing that light filter through the trees. I remember doing that with my mom when I was a kid, and doing that with my daughter, to see how the street has evolved, but that same beauty, that same sense of place that the chair spoke about is elemental to downtown. I just love it. Can't get enough.
Member Jordan.
Anywhere at or within eyesight of the water.
Vice Chair Saxon.
Present. I would say people watching. All kinds of good people watching on State Street.
Well, thank you all. That's really interesting. Marge, I love the fact that you love the public market. You better. So let me start by saying that Ken and I are really honored to be your chair and vice chair. And we have basically spent the last month getting to know our staff. And I got to say that we have built a really good rapport and working relationship with our 2 key staff, Eli Isaacson and Tess Harris, who essentially you will be obviously getting to know a lot better. and that they're all going to probably meet with you individually. Ken, do you want to say anything at this point relative to overview of our month leading into this meeting?
Thanks, Dave. Just to say that, you know, one of the things that's going to be happening here, among many things in the next couple of months, is we're going to be getting to know each other. And so I just encourage all of us to speak up when we have something to say, and pay good attention when others are speaking, and take whatever opportunities that we can, even between meetings, to be connecting with one another.
Well, Ken and I basically are meeting with Eli and Tess at a monthly chairs meeting, the chairs meeting with the staff to prepare the agenda. We did have an organizing meeting with the 2 of the 3 council people on this to talk about that in the city attorney's office relative to procedure. I think at this time, we're going to keep it to the smaller group, and we're going to focus only on the agenda preparation and development. At this point, I'd really like to introduce Tess Harris. She is our State Street Master Planner. She will be our prime staff person working with us. I know that she's reaching out to every one of you to meet you individually, but last week she did not get a few moments simply to come on camera and say hello to us. So Tess, it's all yours.
Thanks so much, Dave. It's great to be with all of you, and I'm super happy to be on board officially at the city, and now in almost the end of my first month here. I was sorry not to be present at the first meeting, but was listening in as an attendee, so enjoyed that. And I'm just really thrilled to be the State Street Master Planner. I came from the County of Santa Barbara. I've lived in Santa Barbara for a long time, and State Street is just such an exciting opportunity to work on reimagining and revitalizing the downtown area, and State Street's a place that we all enjoy. So really happy to be here, and I will be reaching out to each of you individually to see if we can set up time to chat either in person or by phone, whatever your preference is, just to start to get to know each other.
Great, thank you very much. Also last month, Suzanne Tejada was not with us, and she did not get her little moment in the sun to give a little hello to everybody. So Suzanne had contacted me, and I know viewed the tape and everything. Suzanne, you want to say a few words and introduce yourself?
Sure. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, good. I'm glad to have a chance to meet everybody. I did listen to the video. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to attend in August, but just a little background about myself. I grew up in Goleta. I graduated from Dos Rios High School, and I moved back to Santa Barbara in 2002, and I am a practicing architect. I'm a licensed architect. I was president of the AIA chapter Santa Barbara in 2012. I was involved in the 2020 design charrette of the downtown revisioning. So that is something that is the whole subject of the future of the downtown and State Street is really close to my heart. I'm also part of the Access Advisory Committee to the City of Santa Barbara. So I have a disability which makes it hard for me to walk. So I'm very involved in the disabled community in terms of being sensitive to access and all of those things that come with having some disabilities and having to maneuver around situations. So that is something also that I personally experience, and I'm also have really strong feelings about. So I'm really happy to be here, and I hope that with all of my background and in design and architecture and living in Santa Barbara, I could make a contribution to this committee.
Great, thank you very much. Just real quickly before we get into agenda review, talk a little bit about protocols relative to the video and the audio. It was suggested that we operate like the council does, which is during presentations, what have you, we're off camera. And if you want to talk or ask a question, then you turn your camera on, and that way we know that you want to speak and what have you. That way I'm not looking at 17 different screens trying to catch a hand or whatever. I don't know if that's going to work, and I'll tell you why. Right? At some point, I want this to be conversational, right? Rather than back and forth, but more conversational, letting people basically have some dialogue. So what I'm going to suggest is we do that during presentations. We'll go off screen during presentations. Pop on if you've got a question. And since it's conversational, don't wait to the end. You got a question, you got a comment, pop in. I've talked to Tess about this and shake your head. You're okay with that, right? Okay. Okay. So you pop in basically if you have a question or comment. That way we can catch that as we do. We get to the end of the presentation. I'm going to ask that essentially the share screen go away. We're all seeing each other and we can have much more of a dialogue in that regard. So let's try it, see what happens. One thing which Ken and I think learned early on in this process is there isn't a lot of structure yet. We're going to get a chance to design this structure ourselves. I use the bad analogy that we're designing the airplane as we're flying it. So hopefully, Ken and I don't help you crash in that regard, but we're going to do the best we can to get you there. Agenda review, that's our next item. So we talked a little bit about what did we hear last time. What I heard was what, why, and how are we doing this master plan process? What's the council really asked us to do? What's the role and responsibility of the SSAC? Will we need a consultant at some point? How does the Brown Act apply to us? When are we going to be meeting regularly that we can all make the meeting? And how do we access and share background reference materials? And basically, can we talk to one another, right? If you looked at our agenda, we basically tried to structure this to do exactly that. A, discuss the street master plan approach objectives. If you've had a chance to look at the PowerPoint, you're going to see that we basically try to answer those questions specifically, but we really, really want to have a discussion on that. The Brown Act, it's a little daunting when I looked at the slides from the Brown Act for us who basically don't live this stuff. It's a little bit more. We had asked essentially that they tell us, the city attorney's office, take a few moments to tell us what we can do, not just what we can't do. So hopefully we have a conversation on what we can do as well as can't. We need to establish regular meeting schedule, and Tess has some answers as to what the polling that we've done. And then we want to have some open discussion again at the end as to where we're going, what else we need to talk about, and I'm looking forward to a conversation. So is anything else that we need to put on the agenda for today? Speak up, and I'm going to move on. Good. That takes us into the first item, essentially is the resources for SSAA's for the State Street Advisory Committee. Tess, you want to, I'm sorry, call you by first name. You Miss Harris. I get too familiar, guys. And
thank you, Chair Davis.
What I do, thank you. Go ahead.
So I created a resources page for the State Street Advisory Committee. Hopefully you've had a moment to take a look at it, but no worries if not. It's on the agenda, minutes, and meeting schedule page under SSAC, and I'll take us to it right now just so you can get a sense for it. The idea here, this is really just a starting point. This resource list is going to expand and change as we go through. Please feel free to send me any resources that you come across or you think might be beneficial for the entire group to see. I've divided it into a few different sections: core, recommended, additional, and then there are some books and news articles at the end. I'll take just the first link, for example. If you just click on the link, you'll be directed to that resource. In this case, it's a web page. In other cases, it's a PowerPoint or a news article and other items as well. Any questions on the resource page?
Any questions for anybody? You guys can get in there. Before you move on, let me just bring up a point. We got and you might have saw from Greta, we sent out a notice for a housing meeting that the League of Women Voters is putting on with the Housing Authority. That Saturday, October 9th in De La Guerra Plaza. This is the type of thing which we'll talk about under the Brown Act as a conference or seminar. You can all attend, right? It's not something, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. They do have the breakout rooms where they're going to have half-hour discussions with council people, and I would think that we couldn't have more than 7 of us in one of those sessions talking to a council people under the Brown Act. But as we get these things, Tess and I have talked about putting an announcement section here, because I think we're all in our own lives are going to have activities and events that basically are relevant to what we're doing, that hopefully you'll bring it to us and we'll get it on the agenda and we can talk about it, and even sometimes download afterwards as a group as to what do we learn and get from those events. This particular one, I promised that I would get that notice out to you, which we did today. And if you're interested in sitting down in the half-hour sessions with council people, you got to contact Greta so that she can get a schedule that we don't have more than 7 of you sitting in one of those sessions. That work? Oh, good. Okay. Hey, an action item, item D, approval of the minutes from August 11th, 2021. We've all had a chance to look at them. And as chair, I'd look for a motion to approve the minutes.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes. It's Roger.
Motion, okay, motion by committee member Durling. Do I have a second?
I'll second that. Lenvick.
Lenvick has seconded it. Greta, you want to do a roll call on that?
Yes, we have member Black is absent, so member Blackerby,
Aye.
member Bonderson,
She's
member
absent.
thank you, member Durling,
Aye.
member Ehrman,
Aye.
member Elander,
Aye.
member Lewis also absent, member Miller,
Aye.
member Tejada,
Abstain.
member Gutierrez is absent, member Harmon,
Yes.
member Jordan,
Yes.
Chair Davis,
Yes.
Vice Chair Saxon.
Aye.
Good. Thank you very much. Moves us into the agenda item of review, the State Street Master Plan process approach and outcome. Ms. Harris, floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Chair Davis. Hi again, everyone. I'm going to lead us through the first agenda item, the State Street Master Planning process and approach. I want to start out again by reiterating what Chair Davis said earlier, that this section in particular is really conversational, and I encourage you to jump in, ask questions, interrupt. I'm fine with that, so please feel free. I also want to reiterate that we're here to define the process before us for the State Street Master Plan. This process is not something that the city has defined yet. It's not something that's already come to us. We're really here as a committee and as a group to define what we're going to do going forward and how that State Street Master Plan will look like at the end. We know what we're tasked with, and I'll get to that in a moment, but we don't necessarily know what the outcome will look like. So that's an exciting thing, and that's something that I hope that we'll be able to come to an agreement on at the end of this meeting in terms of process and in some of the future meetings. So jumping right in, we're going to work on designing the overall process for the master plan together with the goal of identifying why we're here and embarking on this process, what it is that we're tasked with, and what items should be addressed, and how we're going to accomplish our work, and what the timeline is going to look like. So let's start with the why. And by why, it can mean a couple different things. One of the meanings of the why is, what is our purpose? Or why are we embarking on the State Street Master Planning process? The slide before you shows you just a quick brainstorm from myself of the why for me, why I think we're embarking on the State Street Master Planning process to reimagine the future of State Street. This isn't set in stone by any means. And so I actually want to turn it over to all of you, take 1 to 2 minutes to answer the question why we're doing this. Why are we embarking on the master planning process? Or what is the purpose? So if you could all just take a moment, and then I'll ask a couple of you to share with me after. All right, 10 more seconds here and then we'll jump right in. Anyone willing to share their why at this point? Let's start with Robin and then we'll go to Kristen. Ms. Elander?
Thank you. We have such a great opportunity right now with the opening of State Street. We had an emergency, but what came out of that emergency was an opportunity to re-envision the way we interact with the space. And I think we've seen that we have some outdated models. We have some things that we can improve on, and we have this real opportunity to do so. So there's certainly a whole lot more that can be said, but I'll stop there for now.
Great, thank you. Ms. Miller?
I like everything on your list there, and I would just add to an ability for us to be proactive and look to the future while responding to some major changes that have happened in the world, including, of course, the global pandemic, but really changes to housing and the need for housing, massive changes in the retail market, and potentially changes in the future to commercial and office space markets.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to share? Yes, Mr. Saxon?
I would like, this is an opportunity for our downtown core to feel like a thriving center of our civic life, and to be in balance for how it serves our local residents, the people of our city, as well as the tourists who come and visit here.
Great, thank you. If you didn't get a moment to share, if you could send me your why response. Let's take Miss Blackerby as well.
Sorry.
I saw your hand jump up.
Yeah, just real quickly. So I think I agree with what other folks have said, but two things pop to mind for me. One is being able to sort of reimagine and redesign from scratch a full system of how people get around, so people of all abilities and all kinds of modes, because obviously it's got to be different. It already is. And then the other piece is to make sure that we're stewarding public space and making the use of it equitable, and sort of reimagining what it was before, but also refining what's going on now with, with the use of public space for private business while also supporting the businesses. Thanks.
Hey, Jesse, let's take Roger and Ed and let them go too, because we didn't have that many. And
Sure.
we're good on.
Mr. Durling, would you like to go next?
Chair Davis, I would like comments.
So, I mean, I think this might be understood, but an effective revitalized urban downtown can create the conditions for financial impact, not just the local, but the state economy, and investing in the revitalizing of the downtown. It will make sure that that the property value will go up. It will attract tourists and just an overall economic vitality of the city.
Great, thank you. Mr. Lundbeck, would you like to share?
Thank you. Your last item reflects on how public space can enhance private property and business. I think that needs to be made more, it needs to be a stronger statement. I mean, we need to come up with solutions that will make the business aspects of State Street more inviting and vital. I think right now we kind of skip by, why isn't retail healthy? And we go in, we kind of shrug our shoulders and go on to how do we design benches or whatever. I think the first thing we've got to do, or parallel with what we do on design, is we've got to consider how we make downtown retail more important to the entire community. The tourists will find it. The tourists will walk around, they'll have lunch, they'll go into the bar. But it wouldn't be nice to have a tourist also buy a nice pair of shoes other than T-shirts, or what will get people downtown, get our own community members downtown. And merely being pretty isn't going to do it, I don't believe. We've got to be more proactive on how we advocate for business improvements downtown. Thank you.
Thank you. That was great. Ms. Ehrman?
I agree with everyone. I think that there's so many different aspects of the why, but really taking from every example that everyone gives, it's looking at a holistic view of where we're at and making sure that everything is working together, because we want to look at transportation and the issues with transportation, housing, homelessness, economic development, and just slicing these issues separately, we really wouldn't be able to come to a real solution. So looking at how we can take the past, learn from the past, but really bring this space into the 21st century for the locals and anyone who comes here.
Great, thank you. Any others before we move on? Okay. Oh, Ms. Caparelli?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that I think that, the reason the city council felt that this was important was to create community placemaking. In order for retail to be viable and property values to go up and to draw people downtown, we have to create a place that is a place that the community, all aspects of our community, want to engage in.
Great, I couldn't agree more. That's a good one to end on. So, and if you didn't get a chance to share and you would like to, please feel free to email me with your response, and I'm happy to take those by email as well. So this next slide has the question, why now, up on it. And the question and responding bullet points are coming from a summary of responses from city commissioners, downtown stakeholder interviews, and input from the State Street Subcommittee. This might look familiar. This went to City Council on March 9th of 2021 as really kind of visioning of the State Street Master Planning process. And I'm putting this slide up here really is more of a bit of background and to acknowledge that this is how our community responded to the question, why now? I think it helps our work be informed as the State Street Advisory Committee. But I also want to open it up to the group to see if there's anything else here that we want to add for the question, why now? So we have to revitalize downtown, create a safe experience for economic revitalization, to be people-centric, facilitate housing, recapture and reestablish downtown's identity, bring people downtown, design for locals, because it accomplishes the most significant part of downtown revitalization, because it will create and define the identity of Santa Barbara, because it gives the downtown revitalization a local focus, because it will renew our pride in downtown, because it will make downtown a stronger destination for Santa Barbarans, the region, and the tourist industry. Does anything else come to mind from this group that they'd like to add?
I don't know if this is going too much in the weeds, but I know right now with the promenade and the park blitz, that has a times table to March 2022. So making sure that we have a long-term solution for the promenade as well.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? Ms. Miller?
Just add a little context of why now is that by focusing on this issue that is very Santa Barbara centric, it is really for the benefit of the entire region as well. And I think there's great support from all corners to do this now.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to transition from the question, the why, behind the State Street Master Plan over to what, meaning what is this group tasked with? So the State Street Subcommittee recommended to City Council that an advisory committee be formed, which is all of you today, to help guide the State Street Master Plan. So the group is really tasked with providing input to City Council on two items, on the interim operations of downtown State Street and the creation of the State Street Master Plan. Any questions here before we move on these two items? All right. So we're getting into another question that was asked to different stakeholders and commissioners and community members. And this is the question was, what does State Street aspire to be? Again, it's a bit of background acknowledging how our community envisioned State Street at the end of this process. And I want you to think fast forward to 1 or 2 years in the future. What do you want State Street to be described as, or what do you want State Street to look like? How do you want people to describe State Street when they're talking to you and the downtown community in general? So right now up on the slide from, again, the various surveys and stakeholder interviews we have is the healthiest, most thriving part of Santa Barbara, the defining place of Santa Barbara's identity, accessible to all types of people, families, generations, income levels, abilities, and diversities, a place memories are made, a place to see people and experience community, a gathering place, the spine of downtown, the Grand Paseo, a must experience and re-experience. It feels safe, inviting, accessible, bustling, local. It provides dining, music, art, local culture, play spaces, open spaces, a place for walking, for biking, for people with all abilities to move up and down the street, a spine for downtown, recognized districts, a park-like experience, a gathering place for the community, and connection to side street businesses. It represents Santa Barbara's sustainable values and experience that are unique, and it reflects our history and Indigenous people that lived before us, the diversity of our community, and is welcoming to them all. So these are really a summary of what was gathered previously. But when you think of the question, what does State Street aspire to be, or what is that end goal? Can you think of anything else that you'd like to add here? It could also be highlighting something that you see on the slide. Yes, Ms. Blackerby?
I think it should be fun. Maybe that's obvious, but I think it's something important to call out, and fun for all kinds of people, right? I think there's a good list there. The other thing I just wanted to call out is the last bullet point, that it reflects our history and Indigenous people that lived before us. I just want to make sure that we're clear that Indigenous people still live here. They're not just part of history. Not saying that's where you were going, but a lot of times that is how things get written, that those are people from before, but obviously we're still on Chumash land, and they're our neighbors as well.
Great point. I'll make sure that we update that. Ms. Elander, and then we'll go to Ms. Ehrman.
Thank you. I wanted to include connectivity to the beach in here. I didn't see that listed. Innovative space, kind of a model community. Do we have anything about being a green? Oh, sustainable values. Okay, good. And then this is obvious because it says inviting, but it is very clean. It's immaculate and it's sophisticated.
Great. Those are good additions. Thank you. Ms. Ehrman?
And it is highlighted here, and Robin just mentioned it, but making sure that we lean into the sustainable values and what that really means for our aspirations with State Street.
Great, thank you. Anyone else like to add anything, Ms. Miller, Mr. Jerling?
Really, they've said all the good stuff. I was just looking for do we have emojis that we can click, you know, the little hearts and smileys? Because I love this. I think this is exciting. That's all I wanted to say.
Great, thank you. Wonderful. All right, thanks to all of you for your input so far. So we're now going to focus on the interim operations portion of what we're tasked to do and talk about what should be addressed as part of this work. So getting into the what, I first want to take a step back and acknowledge there are a couple things that are going on when we talk about interim operations and management. So we have an emergency economic recovery ordinance that is set to expire March 8th of 2022. And staff is currently working on preparing a recommended ordinance to transition out of the emergency ordinance into a period of economic recovery. During this interim period, interim economic recovery period prior to the State Street Master Plan being adopted, and we can think that it'll take some time for this master plan to get adopted, and then once it is adopted, hopefully there'll be some form of a capital improvement project coming after it, and that will take some time to get fully up and running. So in that interim period, we can test certain things and approaches, and we might want to transition elements that are temporary currently to more long-term improvements. So I've listed some of the items that might need to be addressed in the interim period, just as a jumping off point. So we have the extent of the closure, where the closure might begin and end, or what it might include. Building code implications, meaning what's been done or changed, or what needs to change to meet building code requirements. Design and aesthetics, and management and operations of the street. There's some other thoughts that I have too on what items could be addressed. But before I get into that, I wanted to check in with all of you and see what other items might you want to include, or are we missing anything in this list? Again, this is thinking first in that first circle that we had, the interim operations. We'll get to the master plan in a moment.
Tess, you might also kind of talk about the fact that we're going to be coming back with staff recommendations on these items, what the process will be to address the interim. Gives everybody an idea where we're going.
Sure. Yes, definitely. So we have a kind of in tandem with this group, we're starting to form an internal working group to work on the State Street Master Plan and also the interim operations and management. There's a lot of different departments that are involved in the various issues at hand, as I'm sure you can imagine. And I'm getting up to speed on meeting everybody within the city as well. But the goal here really is to identify different areas that we might want to address in the interim, and then have staff provide some background or history on what's occurred or what is feasible from a technical standpoint, or perhaps from a public safety standpoint. There's certain items that we can change and we can think about, and there are certain items that are somewhat fixed. And we'll certainly have those discussions. And so the thought right now is that we would have, during future meetings, we would have a staff group come to the SSAC meeting and provide a brief presentation on one or two of those items that we might want to address in the interim period. And then hopefully what we do in this interim management phase will help guide us in the overall State Street Master Planning process. Any questions on that or thoughts? And then maybe coming back, so from that, maybe thoughts on what we might be able to think about when we think of interim operations and what we might want to address. I saw Ms. Elander's hand go up. Do you want to say anything?
Yes, on the question, what are we missing? Some of the things that I think we may want to consider addressing are how we want to activate the street, in what ways, what types of events or activities, uses are allowable, and to what extent and to what frequency, that those types of things. We're already getting a lot of questions about what we can do on the street and things like that, and we're trying to navigate and manage those. So that's something. And then also the maintenance of the space in a way that it's kind of in the management and the operations sections, but not only during the day, but also the night and early morning, and how all of those things come into play.
Great, thank you. Vice Chair Saxon, I saw your hand go up. Would you like to add anything?
Yes, thanks. I wanted to just lift up that, of course, the cause of the emergency ordinance, the global pandemic, is something that we can't exactly predict what the direction that's going to be going over time, and so that's going to add a layer of complexity to all of these discussions. So just to mention that we're really going to need to stay flexible and adaptable to the overall context in which we're operating.
Thank you, that's definitely true. Ms. Tejada?
Yes, I just wanted to add one small item. Transportation, like getting, from point A to point B. I think there's two issues we need to look at, is the bicycles and also maybe the trolley. So that would be, I think, important in the interim time as well.
Great, thank you. Ms. Blackerby?
Agree with Ms. Tejada, but also sort of a question, and totally fine if you don't have an answer today, but thinking about interim and thinking about budget in the interim, right? Because things have been nibbled around the edges. There's some paint, there's some planters, there's some other, sort of hard infrastructure that's been put out there. I guess something that in the future, when we talk about interim stuff, how it's not like there's some magic extra pot of money that the city has for this, but it would be good to know sort of within what kind of boundaries are we working, or do we just say, well, let's ask for it and see what we get from the council. That's just a thought so that we know kind of what those boundaries are for interim, because obviously a lot of things have happened thus far that weren't necessarily planned. So it's just a sort of overarching question as we move forward.
Great point there, Ms. Blackerby. And I would envision that during the interim period, to me, there would be opportunity to pilot some approaches or test some approaches, but you're certainly right. We would need to identify the funding mechanism for how we could go about doing that. That's a great point. Councilmember Jordan, did you want to mention anything?
Hi, Tess. Good to meet you. I guess just to put a thought in your head too, to worry about too, would be, should there be triggers for even leaving the state we're in now and beginning an interim period? Right now, we may have the best COVID numbers in the country, but that doesn't mean we will in March. And to that point, I'm told that the county on their meeting on the 14th actually extended their emergency ordinance until, I want to say, like October 2023. So they have obviously elected not to even enter an interim period yet. So just food for thought.
Thank you, Councilmember Jordan. I'm smiling because I helped. That is the last project I worked on before moving over to the city. Did anyone else have any comments? Mr. Isaacson?
Thank you, Tess. I think one other, to piggyback on the comments of Vice Chair Saxon and Councilmember Jordan, there are other things that are sort of out of our control as well. And one of those is policies of state ABC or alcoholic beverage control. And there may be things, decisions made at the state level that will impact our ability to control our interim operations and management strategies. And so I just want to bring some attention to that, because there are some non-discretionary items that we will have to work with as well.
Great point. Thank you for adding that. Anyone else before we move on? All right. So thank you for the discussion on the interim operations. We're going to shift gears now and talk about the State Street master planning process and what should be addressed as part of this work. So before you are areas of consideration that came out of the March 9th, 2021 Council Agenda Report, which included recommendations from the State Street Subcommittee. You'll see them up here: streetscape design and amenities, transportation and circulation, housing and redevelopment influences, economic development, historic resources, equity and accessibility, homeless engagement, public art, operation and maintenance, and funding strategy. When I looked at this list, I think it's a really great start. I want to open it up to the group to see if there's some other things that you might consider adding or changing or amending as part of this list of things that we might want to consider for the State Street Master Plan. Some thoughts just coming from my mind were thinking about sustainability strategies or green infrastructure or programming. Perhaps we want to look at festivals and parades or performance arts or public safety issues. So just to get some thoughts flowing, those are just some additional thoughts that I had. Perhaps we can weave those into these categories, or if this group wants to consider adding other categories, we could do that as well. So any thoughts here? I see Ms. Caffarelli join. Yep.
Thank you, Tess. I think as we look at this, I think that a consultant is an important piece of this, working with this committee and the community and staff, and really looking at the zoning, the length of downtown. It's a 13-block downtown, I think. You know, what constitutes downtown. I think there are many considerations in terms of land use that need to be a part of this.
Excellent point. Definitely. I see some others. Great. Let's go with Mr. Becker next.
Thank you, Tess. I would just like to add in the transportation and circulation category to include parking, because I think that kind of touches on a handful of the other topics, just to make sure that we don't forget about that.
We addressed that. Great. Thank you. Ms. Miller?
Am I muted? Thank you. I kind of want to just piggyback onto what Marge said. I kind of agree that, you know, master planning has a list of technical aspects that are certainly beyond me right now today to brainstorm a list of, and potentially, you know, something that we should be looking at sort of differently. So if this is a list to sort of get us in a direction, that's fine. But I kind of want to agree with Marge that there's probably 10 more things that should be on this list that I could dream up, but would be better done a different way. Does that make sense?
Sure. No, understood. That's helpful. Yes, Ms. Elander.
I would like to try to get a handle on the geographical space that we're speaking of. I know we're talking about State Street, but we're also talking about circulation, side streets, and how far we're going right, left, up, or down, so we can really hone in on what is necessary to talk about and how far out we need to navigate conversations with stakeholders on this issue. So that would be one thing. And then also stormwater aspects and how those flow of water in different circumstances are being considered as well.
Great, thank you for that. All right, so we'll keep moving on. And again, this is really just a jumping off point to get us started to think about what could this master plan look like? What are the different elements that we could include? I certainly hear the comments raised about wanting to get, consultants on board, and there could be many other issues at hand, and that we'll talk about that in a moment, because I agree. We should be looking at the process as a whole and how we're going to get there. Chair Davis, did you want to add something?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to reemphasize two things which came up from other people, one from you. I think sustainability infrastructure needs to be its own point. And I think there are microgrids and lots of other elements there that basically need special attention. And I think it was Robin who just brought up the hydrology and drainage. That's a big issue downtown. So yes, I think it's a separate issue. And I know you're going to get into consultant and RFPs and scoping and all of that. And this is the beginning of that discussion. So thank you.
Thank you, Chair Davis. All right, so we've tackled the what. We're now going to transition into how. So how are we going to achieve and set out what we're tasked to do? I'm going to now present two different options for a very high level roadmap from start to finish that we can discuss and fine tune for what this process might look like or how we're going to get from A to Z. And ultimately, we want to get to the finalized State Street Master Plan approach with this committee providing significant input throughout the way to get us to that end goal, and hopefully a recommendation to council for approval for a State Street Master Plan. So we'll start with the first option. We're calling this the phased approach. This is a sequential approach. So the timing of the State Street Master Plan, which is the one in pink or purple on your screen, is really dependent on this interim management process occurring first, the one in green that you see. We're currently in the process design phase and estimating that that's going to take a few months for us to really identify our roles as a committee, our guiding principles, and where we're headed. This approach would delay the start of the master planning phase. So because it's sequential, it means that we would work one at a time in phasing. So we wouldn't really get started on the State Street Master Plan. And these numbers are just very rough estimates on the timing component, but my guess was probably around the second quarter of 2022. This is a simpler process, but it would take a little bit longer to achieve or complete both phases. There is a benefit. A benefit would be that you take the interim management approach and you learn from what you've done there to help inform the State Street Master Plan. A con here would be that the end date for the final State Street Master Plan is pretty far out, is anticipated to be the end, potentially the end of 2023, which is a while from now. So I'm going to go through the next approach, and then we can chat about both of them and what might work or what we might want to change. So this next approach is called the parallel track approach. And this, after really thinking through it, I think this, to me, seems like an approach that we might want to consider, but I certainly want to seek input and thoughts from this. This committee is the one that ultimately will decide what approach we take. So this is a concurrent approach, meaning that the interim operations and the State Street Master Planning process work together. So that's why you see the green and the pink or purple bars overlapping in terms of timing. It provides the ability for us to begin a discussion on scoping for the State Street Master Plan or the scope of work, and start to think about a request for proposals and start to have conversations about consultants and select consultants during the time that we're doing the interim management phase. So we'll be doing the flip side of that is that there will be more coordination efforts required on all of us, because there'll be multiple elements within each of our meetings and then outside of our meetings as well to consider. So from that standpoint, we might want to think about subgroups or subcommittees. That might be something that we'll need to do for certain elements of this so that we can stay on track. A positive of this approach is that we get to the completion of the State Street Master Plan a little bit sooner, anticipating the end of 2022 or early 2023 in this regard. So I'm going to pause there. There's a lot on this slide. I'll maybe highlight that I would envision that we'd have public outreach throughout the process for the State Street Master Plan. So that's here just highlighted in either approach. I think that would be the case. And then I had envisioned or indicated that we'd be working on the master plan for about a year to a year and a half. Again, the timing component here can change and fluctuate. And this is just to sort of give us a jumping off point to have a discussion. So I will stop there. I'll take questions and also comments on if you have a preference between the two approaches or what benefits there might be or cons there might be to each one. Yes, Ms. Elander.
So this outline or representation here, this defines the planning to plan and the outreach process and creating a document that informs what might be built or the next phase of it, which would actually be the build out. So that does not happen within this time frame. So that goes into 2024. Is that correct?
So the actual, Ms. Elander, I think what you're meaning is like the project that the State Street Master Plan would ultimately build out, correct?
Correct.
So yes, this is envisioning that we would get to a completion of the State Street Master Plan. Maybe it's at the end of 2022, maybe it's at the beginning of 2023, but then after that point, we would be going out for, hopefully for a capital improvement project and getting that under construction. That's where perhaps this graphic should really have the interim management then, maybe in two phases. So we've got one where we're really planning the interim management operations, but then the second phase where we can have a second bar that shows that it's actually in action until the master plan is completed and a capital improvement project is underway. That is a great point, though.
I think I understand that. Thank you.
Yes, Ms. Caffarelli.
So, Tess, I think you did a really great job with this. I think a parallel track approach makes a lot of sense because an interim management plan, if you will inform what we're doing, I think, with the the scoping and the RFP process. I think having an interim management plan at the same time that we're working on these other things, I think it makes a lot of sense. It could be a lot of work for sure, but I think it makes a lot of sense.
Great, thanks for the input. Yes, Ms. Miller.
I wanted to hear comments from the group, but I also lean toward the parallel track approach because you know how life goes. You learn things as you go along and you can kind of fit that into both things. Plus, I just feel like what we know now is going to change, and as we get new information, we might as well apply that to both things.
Great, thanks for the feedback. Ms. Blackerby?
Yeah, I agree with parallel, and I appreciate what Robin said about, we need to have some planning for the interim before the interim kicks off. One question I have is about the consultant. So my understanding, and of course I didn't ask anyone about this, is just what I've seen with it rolled out, that, we were sort of doing this mostly in an in-house way. It's why you were hired. I think another planner is coming on. Obviously, this talks about a scope of work for a consultant, but could you just sort of share your understanding at this point right now about just broad strokes of what a consultant is? Is the consultant going to be in charge of outreach? Is a consultant just going to be in charge of writing the plan, research, that kind of stuff? I'm just curious so that I can get in my mind like how this would roll out.
Sure, thank you, Ms. Blackerby. So that process, I think we're going to have to define somewhat as a group. I would envision that myself, along with Mr. Isaacson, and then the project planner that would come on board would be managing the, if we do go a consultant route, would be managing the consultant or consultants on the various pieces for the master plan. That might be that we're pulling together research and then working with the consultant to figure out how to best present that in a master plan. It could be that we're doing joint efforts in public outreach, or that staff is primarily taking public outreach efforts. I have thoughts on how we could do that. So I don't see it as a consultant would just take what we do and run with it on their own. I see it really as a team effort. But in my opinion, I think this is it could be a large project and process with multiple stages. The interim management and the State Street Master Plan are both very large projects. And so there might be a benefit to having a consultant on board that has the master planning experience and can help guide the team, both from the committee standpoint, from the staff standpoint, just so that we keep moving forward. But I would envision that we all would really play a pretty key role. And then maybe one other thing I would highlight is that and it's still up for, we don't necessarily need to go a consultant route. That's not a given. But if we did go a consultant route, that we would be working together as the committee and then myself on really finessing what that scope of work might look like, what we want to see in the master plan. And then going out, I would envision that we'd be going out for a request for proposals and looking at together, or, what different consultants might respond. So I hope that answers it. But if Mr. Isaacson wants to add anything else, or anybody.
No, thank you, Tess. I think you did a good job of explaining the various roles consultants could play on this project. I think we are still, the roadmaps that Tess has presented today are diagrammatic, I think, in nature. These are set in stone schedules or a set in stone relationship amongst the various efforts, but they're more intended to illustrate conceptually how the two approaches differ from one another. And so I think this process, this sort of designing the how we will approach both tasks of the interim management strategies as well as the State Street Master Plan, that conversation will reveal how consultants will engage with this process moving forward.
Great, thank you. That really helped.
So it sounds like so far the consensus is to go the parallel track route. Does anybody else have any thoughts or comments or questions on this approach? And we'll still be defining it certainly along the way as we go together. Okay, all right, seeing none, we will go ahead and move forward. So the last slide that I have is really, what does input to City Council mean? And so I wanted to start off by just stating that as staff, we really plan to make quarterly reports to Council to help guide, or to help provide a status update and get feedback from City Council on where we're going or where we're headed along the way. And then in terms of what does input look like or mean for the interim operations, staff's hoping to seek this committee's feedback on what we're going to propose potentially for the ordinance replacing the emergency economic recovery ordinance, but then also seeking input and feedback and guidance during the interim recovery period, that green bar, that the State Street Advisory Committee can identify issues to address or explore in that period. And then for the State Street Master Plan, really this committee's been formed to oversee and provide the input on the development of this master plan, what needs to be studied, what the scope of work it might entail, what kind of public input we might need, and then ultimately what we envision the master plan at the end to look like. And the hope would be is that at the end of this, we would have a recommendation from this committee for approval for a State Street Master Plan. Any questions or anything else to add here? Perhaps for the the council members that are on. Is there input that you envision this committee providing you that might be different from what I stated?
I'll just add, everything you said was really good, but also personally, I think one of the reasons we lobbied for 3 council members on this group too was so we'd get kind of an early bite at the apple to help you with the input and be able to carry that input successfully with 3 people rather than just 1 or 2. So I think that's a key selling point to anything migrating out of this committee, hopefully. That's like a jinx, right? Right?
I certainly appreciate
I was going to
that.
say, don't say that, Mike. This is Megan. I'll just jump in. Yeah, I'll just second that. I think this has been a great discussion, and a lot of what you all have brought up, I think, is very reflective of our intent and purpose in putting this together. So really nothing to add, and thanks.
Great, thank you. Okay, before we move on to public comment, any other questions or thoughts on this first agenda item from the group?
I was just going to jump in to say that we're kind of running a little bit behind time, so I was going to run into public comment right now. Ms. Walters, do we have any public comment on this particular item?
Thank you, Chair Davis. If anyone on this call, any member of the public would like to speak, please use the raise hand function. I'll call on you and you'll have 2 minutes to speak. There are no members of the public who have raised hand. We do have 1 raised hand. Mr. John Campanella, I will unmute you and you will have 2 minutes to speak. 1 moment, please. It looks like you might be self-muted, Mr. Campanella. So you should see a microphone in your control panel. If you click that once, it should unmute you, and you should be able to speak. And we're not getting any audio from you. Mr. Campanella, if you're able to, you could type your question into the question box in your control panel. And I'm not seeing questions, and he still appears to be self-muted, so.
Okay, let's carry John to the end of the meeting, and if we get recontact with him before we adjourn, we can do that. We'll move on to the next item. Thank you for that.
Sure.
Okay, we're going to go into item B, which is the discussion of the Brown Act and the relationship to the State Street Advisory Committee. Okay, Ms. Ostringer, who's going to make this presentation? Good afternoon.
Thank you, Chair Davis. And I'm not seeing that, up there they are. Ms. Harris is going to drive these slides for me. So thank you. I know that at the last meeting, there were people had some questions about the Brown Act, what it was, what we could do under it. And speaking with Chair Davis and Vice Chair Saxon, they asked that I try and focus on how the Brown Act facilitates communication between members and how it also its limitations. So I know a lot of you have served on public committees and public bodies, and so you're familiar with the Brown Act, but there's also members on this committee that may not be familiar with it. So I am just going to, I think it's important to give you a little bit of background on its purpose, and then I'll try and move in directly into the communication aspect. Next slide, please. So this statement here is taken from the government code in the Brown Act, which was enacted in 1953 to facilitate transparent and open government. The purpose of it is best stated right here in the statute that says the people in delegating authority did not give their public servants the right to decide what is good for the people to know and what is not good for them to know. The people insist on remaining informed so that they may retain control over the instruments they have created. So basically the Brown Act is, as the government agency, is ensuring that the public has the right to participate in these meetings and be heard when the decision makers are making these decisions. It covers a very broad scope of commissions and committees, generally anything that's created legislatively through an ordinance, resolution, charter, or formal action of the legislator will be covered under the Brown Act, just as this committee is. This is a standing committee, and it's subject to the Brown Act's public meeting laws. So next slide, please. The question comes of what is a meeting under the Brown Act? And it is a majority of the members of the body that come together at the same time and location to hear, discuss, deliberate, or take action on any item that's within their subject matter. And pre-COVID, obviously that would be in a room. Right now we're doing that remotely, but for virtual purposes, we're all in the same location. Next slide, please. So with that said, there is a carve out, and legislative committees are able to create ad hoc committees of less than a quorum that are exempt from these public meeting requirements, so long as they're for a short duration and the purpose is to complete a specific task. And once that task is completed, the committee is dissolved. And so I bring that up today because I think it's important to understand that while there is this larger group committee that is subject to these public meeting laws, there is the option and opportunity to create more formal, smaller groups that can meet outside of that. And I'm happy to facilitate and work with you if that's something that this committee decides would be helpful for them. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, it's a majority of the members meeting together at the same time of location that triggers the public meeting requirements. So a minority of the members, should they informally discuss an item within the subject matter of the SSAC, that would not be a public meeting. However, there are things to be conscious of when you're engaging in communication outside of the public meeting, and one of those is public perception. And the intent of the Brown Act to do the public's business in an open and transparent manner that invites the public's participation in this project. Also, one thing I'll touch on later is serial meetings, where the intent may have been for only a minority of the members to be communicating with each other. In some circumstances, unintentionally, that communication can be extended to other members, in which case you've then had a majority communicating, but I'll get into that a little later. Next slide. So there are exceptions to the public meetings that are allowed so that a majority can attend at the same location. And one of these are social and ceremonial occasions. A majority of you can attend a ceremonial event, a party together, and be in that same location. You just can't have sidebar discussions about items that will be before you or within your subject matter jurisdiction. The Brown Act's not intended to prevent you from having fun or deciding who gets to go to what party. It wants you to do that. You just have to recognize that you can't have those comprehensive discussions. It's you leave the shop top at the door, so to speak. Like I mentioned, with minority attendance, there's no meeting, so there's no problem. It's not something that needs to be in your mind. If you want to go have a cocktail or lunch with another member of the committee, you're free to do so, get to know each other in that regard, learn a little about each other. Next slide. Similarly, so individual members of the public can contact each and every one of you and talk to you about the same topic. And that's not a meeting, just because the same member of the public has spoken to each of you. Also, if someone recognizes you in Costco or at Starbucks and they want to talk to you about what's going on with this committee, you're free to talk to them and encouraged to do so if that's what you want to do. What can't happen is for a member of a committee or a legislative body to ask a member of the public or engage someone to act as an intermediary on their behalf, so that that person is going around and conveying information to other members to spread an opinion or just provide information. Next slide. Similarly, we as staff can have separate individual conversations with you in briefings. I think Tess mentioned that she intended to contact each of you, and that's fine. It's helpful for us and you for us to be able to sometimes individually provide you or answer separate questions away from this larger community group. What we can't do is act as that representative and share the information or comments that have been made to us by members of the committee with other members. So we're here to work with you and provide you with what you can. And so please feel free to reach out to us as staff if you have any questions or feel like you need information, particularly me. If you have questions on the Brown Act or anything else, you can email me. I'm always responsive to emails. If you can't get through to me, please talk to Tess and she can connect us. Next slide. Community meetings. I think Chair Davis kind of touched on this, and there's often community meetings that are express a local topic of concern, and a majority of you can attend those meetings and participate in the meeting. However, you can't have any sidebar discussions, so you can't group together and discuss anything that's within the jurisdiction of this committee. Sometimes we ask, it's not required, that if you, for perception from the public, that if you want to maybe not all clump together and sit separately within the audience, it just gives the public the idea that and understanding that no business is being conducted outside of their presence. Next slide. So very similarly, conferences and seminars that involve public concern or business of the city, the majority may attend. We can't, again, the sidebar discussions, other than what is there as part of the program. So feel free to involve yourselves in these seminars and learning experiences. It's always education is encouraged. Next slide. Again, members of the legislative body can attend other open and public meetings of another agency's body. Same thing, sidebar discussions. Don't discuss SSAC's business as a whole within those meetings. And thank you. Standing committees, the majority of the body can attend other standing committee meetings that you are not a member of, so long as you are only observing and not participating in that meeting. Next slide. So this is where I talk about all the things that you can do and how that communication, as you're coming together through these meeting exceptions, or you're talking to less than the majority of the commission, you need to be aware that the Brown Act prohibits serial meetings, and those are a series of communications of any kind, whether they're direct or through an intermediary, that's occur outside the meeting and result in a discussion or a deliberation or some sort of action on an item of business that's within this particular committee's jurisdiction. A lot of times these occur in two ways and are unknown to committee members that it's even happened. So Ms. Harris, the next slide. The two scenarios most common are called the chain or daisy chain scenario. The second one is the wagon wheel scenario. Next slide. So I'll explain examples of these so you can see how they can occur. Under the chain scenario, assume we have a 5-member committee. And in this case, member A goes and discusses something with member B, and then member B in turn discusses the same thing with member C, and then C turns to D and has a substantive discussion with member D. So as you can see, the chain is the link of A to the link of B and then B to C. But it's possible that none of these individuals would know that the discussion had occurred. So that's why when you think about it, and just be careful when you're communicating with other, understanding that what your discussion is could go to someone else and they could take it farther down the chain without anyone really knowing it. Under the wagon wheel scenario with the same 5-person committee setup, A is acting as the hub of this wheel. A is the one who is communicating with B, and then communicates to C, and then subsequently communicates to D. So A is just communicated to a majority of this committee, and A, while they should have known that they were creating a Brown Act violation, B and C may not, and D may not have known, because A is that hub and that center of the wheel that's instigating the conversation without the knowledge of B, C, and D. And even if, I'd want to speak to the fact, even though the B, C, and D didn't know that they were engaging in a violation, the violation still occurs. So next slide. And I want to talk about communications. The communication doesn't always have to be verbal. It can be through email or texting or notes. It's any way to communicate information to another person, which results in a communication to a majority. I also want to just briefly touch on when you're thinking about when you're emailing and doing any kind of business or texting relating to your committee work, that it is a public record and could be subject to a Public Records Act request. So just wanted to keep that in mind. It's not anything under the Brown Act, but it's something to keep in the back of your head. Next slide, please. So the discussions are limited to items that are on the posted agenda. And the reason for this is it goes back to that public participation. The public can't participate if they don't know it's going to be discussed. So that's why we make sure that the agenda properly identifies the action that you're going to take, so members of the public who are interested in that item can come and speak at public comment or hear what's going on. There are 5 exceptions, and I, in my mind, think of those as the housekeeping administration exceptions. Next slide. So when public comment is opened, you are free to ask a question of that public commenter or to respond briefly to the statement that's made. The only advice we give is to please watch how that conversation or those statements are moving forward, because at some point there becomes a back and forth that may have been unintentional, where a discussion is being had that we would want to save to a later meeting with an agenda. Similarly, the staff can answer questions if you need clarification on something that's on a report. It's appropriate to make brief announcements. Chair Davis made that announcement about the housing workshop that's coming up. Or liaison reports are also appropriate. What's the activity of the member? I think of this as reporting out information or providing information and not exchanging in a back and forth dialogue. Next slide. So how do you get information that you need on the agenda? Well, there's generally 3 ways. If it's a simple resource, you can provide it. It's a one-way resource that's given to the rest of the body. You can request that staff report back to the committee at a subsequent meeting concerning something that you wanted more information on. Also, you can take action, make a motion to direct staff to place a matter on the future agendas. So that's a way to engage in that dialogue and get that substantive conversation going that you want to have in front of everybody as a committee. Next slide, please. This is very rare, but I did just want to let you know as part of the training that in certain urgent cases, a matter that's not on an agenda can be put on an agenda by determination of 2/3 votes of the members if they find that there is an immediate need to take the action and that need came to the attention of the body after the agenda was posted. So like I said, very rare, but it is one other way that items go on an agenda. Next slide. I don't think we need to really touch too much on this. There are criminal and civil criminal penalties, civil remedies for Brown Act violations. Next slide. So if a member of a body knowingly violates the Brown Act, there is a possibility for misdemeanor prosecution. Next slide. If a violation does occur, the remedy is for either the district attorney or any member of the public to bring a civil action to determine that the Brown Act applied and that the action taken was in violation of the Brown Act. If it's determined that there was a violation of the Brown Act, then that decision, that action is undone. It's as if it never happened. All right, I think this is, next slide, yep. So I went through that really quick. I'm happy to take questions. I know a lot of the questions often they're scenario based, and the Brown Act is very fact specific when I'm doing analysis of whether the communication can occur or what's going on. So I'll do my best if you had scenario questions, but like I said, I invite you to contact me or call me, and if you ever have any questions.
Great, thank you for that, David. Questions for David at this point on the Brown Act? Boy, I'm not seeing any. Interesting, good. Yeah, you like that. Well, thank you for the offer, Doe. And as you said, anytime that we have a question, your office is there to answer the question in that regard. Ms. Walters, do we have anyone who wishes to speak under this particular item?
No, I do not see anyone who has indicated they wish to speak. So just a quick reminder, if you do wish to speak as a member of the public, click the raise hand icon and you'll have 2 minutes to speak after I call on you. I do not see anyone indicating they would like to speak. Thank you, Chair Davis.
Good, thank you. Thank you very much. Again, thank you for the presentation, and we'll move to the next item, which is item C, establishing a regular meeting schedule and meeting date and times. Ms. Harris, do you want to give us the results of the survey?
Sure, thank you, Chair Davis. So thanks to all of you that participated in the survey that I sent out last week. We got responses from everybody, which is great. There were two kind of winners and one that seems like it works for most. It looks like the third Monday from 4 to 6 p.m. is the preferred date and time for most people. Following up is the fourth Wednesday of the month from 4 to 6 p.m. I did have conversations with the people that had indicated that those two times were not their preference. There were a couple of conflicts on Wednesday still. It looks like Monday we might be able to get most, if not all, of the members at the meeting, either for a portion of the meeting or the full meeting. So I'll just pause there. I also did get some comments through the survey, so I just wanted to acknowledge those. Some of you had preferences for the earlier time frame. Some of you had preferences for the later time frame. Some of you had preferences for after working hours. I understand the reasonings for all of them. I think the 4 to 6 p.m. time frame is sort of a good in between from the comments that I received. So hopefully that will work to some degree for everybody. And then just really quick,
Go ahead.
If we do go back, so at this point we're in a digital environment right now and having virtual meetings. If we do go back to having, which hopefully at some point we will go back to in-person meetings, we can then take a look at the schedule at that point. I'll just need to sort out what meeting room might be appropriate and if it's available during the time that we choose. So going forward, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair Davis, or you, Vice Chair Saxon, if you have any comments on the date or time.
Great. Ken.
Thank you. That was my question, was about in-person gathering and meeting rooms. You know, my hope is that as soon as it's possible, given the auspices of the city and also what the committee wants to do, that we'll be able to meet in person sooner rather than later. So if there was I don't know if there's a room issue on either of these days, but I think it might make sense to include that in the decision process.
Yeah, I would be curious that, again, I don't know the city schedule, but the Monday time schedule would, at least in my old schedule, would conflict with ABR at the David Gebhard room. But the other preference of doing it at City Hall would be right there in our study area, and room 15 has the capacity to handle this kind of committee.
Chair Davis and Vice Chair Saxon, yes. So the third Monday of the month does have a conflict with ABR in the David Gebhard room. And then the fourth Wednesday of the month, it looks like for a majority of the months going forward may have a conflict with the HLC meetings.
Right.
So we're gonna have a conflict probably either way. I'll have to look to see if we can find another meeting room outside of the David Gebhard room that would accommodate all of us.
Well, again, I would suggest looking, I'd suggest looking at room 15 in City Hall itself, because it is large enough for this committee easily in that regard. Ms. Blackerby, Hillary?
Yeah, I got a couple questions about sort of establishing meeting schedule and date and time. And I was one of the people who said, you know, it would be nice if the public could participate and not everybody can do it at 4, but I agree 4 to 6 kind of splits the baby and people might be able to make it if they work till 5 o'clock. You know, as we talk about maybe meeting in person, you know, the Gebhard room, like just our committee, right? we would overwhelm the room, and room 15, I agree would fit. And I know we're not figuring out room space here, but in thinking about public participation in the future, maybe these first few meetings aren't super exciting or compelling or whatever, and so we don't have people participating, but ideally, right, we have a lot of public participation in these meetings. and public comments. And so thinking about, maybe even like other parks facilities or, larger meeting spaces in the future where not only the whole committee could fit, but members of the public could fit so that they could actually participate in person. The other thing I want to put out there, I know that some committees of the city are investigating using Zoom instead of GoToMeeting because this platform is particularly inaccessible for a lot of people, specifically people with disabilities, and frankly, people without disabilities, it's not particularly friendly. So I'm curious if that's something that this committee, in the interest of getting good public participation, is considering. I don't know if staff's considered moving to the Zoom platform for these meetings.
Good question. Yes, any comment on that?
Sure, I can try to answer that. So I completely understand from a personal standpoint, I really enjoy using Zoom as well. I know that at the moment, the city has been using the GoToMeeting platform for various meetings. It's something I can look into, though. That's been a comment that's been raised on the side as well, and so we can take a look and see if there is an ability to, at least for this committee, use Zoom. I don't have an answer for you though today, but hopefully we can get an answer before the next meeting.
And I do know that the Access Advisory Committee at least tested it out for one of their public meetings. My other question is, if these meetings would eventually be on city TV as another way where people can be, in the mix and, because it's a lot easier for someone to flip on their TV than to like register for this and figure out how to come watch it. So anyway, just food for thought for future meetings so that we can really have good public participation.
Chair Davis.
David.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I just wanted to respond to Ms. Blackerby's question. The clerk's office is looking into moving possibly to Zoom for all bodies. So I just wanted to let you know that that's something that's considered.
Great, good, thank you. Robin.
And also just thinking about these future meetings, if there's some in person, how we can do hybrid if needed so that the public can still be involved and maybe a member of the committee may or may not be able to be involved in person. Just our capabilities to be able to potentially do that if we so choose to want to.
Really good point. I think the city is also looking at how do they do hybrid meetings. The public input with Zoom has just been so fantastic that everybody has basically increased their participation. Really good comment. Anybody else comment at this point? Well, what I think I hear is at least our next meeting, our regularly scheduled meeting right now would probably move then, correct me if I'm wrong, Tess, to the third Monday, 4 to 6 would be the best option for most people. And right now also would be the one if we use room 15 or other Parks and Rec, possibly location wise also be more preferable, correct?
Correct. So for now, it sounds like the committee has a majority interest in the third Monday from 4 to 6, and we would keep the meeting virtual for now for the next meeting. And then when we do hopefully transition it in person, we would just announce that transition the meeting prior.
Great,
and
fantastic.
can find a location at that point.
Everybody good with that? Otherwise, speak now. Good, great. Tess, thanks for making that happen. It's a lot of schedules to coordinate there.
No problem.
Okay, under public comment. Ms. Walters, do you want to read the comment that we had from John Campanella that he could not get in before we move to the next item?
Sure, of course. Mr. Campanella notes, visitors may also be friends and families of residents, some of whom may have previously lived here. What is created on state should consider and allow for the interface of both visitors and locals to enjoy equally.
Great, thank you very much for getting that from John.
Of course.
Okay.
And
Go ahead.
There are no other members of the public who have indicated they would like to speak at this time.
Great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, we're going to move into our last item. That's identifying potential agenda items for the next meeting. I'll start with staff. basically think what your thoughts are on the next meeting, and then open it up for any discussion you have as to other items we may want to talk about in next agenda or in the future. Ms.
Sure.
Harris, Tess?
Thank you, Chair Davis. So one of the things that as we've been talking about the what, the why, and the how for the overall process design for the State Street Master Plan, given the approach that I think we've all come to an agreement on, the parallel track approach, I would envision that we'd want to start having that scoping discussion, considering a potential scope of work for what the master plan might look like. So perhaps we could spend a bit of time next meeting to talk about scoping. And one of the things that I've done on the side is take a look at some other plans, other master plans from various cities, either downtown master plans or street focused plans, and done a comparison of 5 different ones, some in California, some in other states. So I can share that with the group in between this meeting and the next, so that everybody can take a look and just start to get a sense for what master plans can look like. I will say they can look really different, and what a master plan includes or doesn't include really varies depending on which city or community or street you're looking at. They're not all the same, and so as a committee, my hope is that we can come to an agreement for what we want to include in this master plan, and how we might want to structure it so that we can define really the scope of work to move forward. So I would just encourage that we start that conversation during the next meeting.
Well, let me ask a question. Are you going to send out a link to that with your information and essentially task us all to review that information and get as familiar as we can to come back so that we have an educated discussion next time? Is that the plan?
Yes, so I will send you, I have a table that compares all 5 of the plans and then the links to all 5 of those plans so that you can go in. If you have the time, I would go into at least a couple of them and take a look, you know, ideally from cover to cover of what the plan includes. And then you can see the table of what I tried to do is identify the different areas that each plan had. The table is pretty lengthy though, because the plans have a lot of more differences than they do similarities in some instances. But the idea would be to really start to get a sense for what do other master plans look like. And it doesn't have to stop at the 5 that I picked. You know, I just picked 5 different ones, really no rhyme or reason. You could choose a street that you've recently visited. I know we have Vice Chair Saxon in Charlottesville right now. So that's an example of a street that, or a community that you could take a look at. There are many other examples out there. Some of the ones that you might often hear are, you know, 3rd Street Promenade, Pearl Street in Boulder. There's just a variety. So I would encourage you to pick one and go take a look at the master plan, and then I will also send out examples.
Well, one of the things I want to do is my prompt next time when we start the meeting will be to identify a street or a downtown that you basically admire. Nadra.
I just wanted to know, when we're looking at master plans from different communities, would that include international, or we? I don't know. Thank you.
You certainly can take, that's a great question. You certainly can take a look at international. The 5 that I picked are, I think there's 3 California and then 2 out of state, but within the US. But there's a lot of international examples as well.
Ed.
Yes, Ms. Harris, has the city not retained an economic development planner that is associated with what's happening on State Street? Question.
Mr. Lenvick, we do have the Economic Development Manager, Jason Harris, who I believe is on the call, and he has a variety of different functions, one of which is to help with this process as well. Jason, did you want to add anything?
Well, my question for the chair and vice chair, and you possibly, is would there not be some value in hearing from the economic development planner and how his work might be applicable to what we are going through ourselves?
Yeah, very much so. And I'm going to let Jason answer that. Jason has done an economic development plan with a focus on downtown. So Jason, we could be on the next agenda to brief him, but go ahead right now, please. Muted.
Apologies.
No problem.
Mr. Chair and committee member Lindvik, my name is Jason Harris. I'm the city's economic development manager. One of the items that we have queued for kind of future agenda topics to provide background updates to the advisory committee members. One of those items is an overview of the city's economic development plan. I was hired just over a year and a half ago, and the principal function of my position was to create an economic development plan and implement it for the city. Council this past June adopted an economic development plan that I drafted, and I'm in the process of implementing that. One of three strategies is related to downtown and has four various goals, objectives. One of those is implementation of the State Street vision, which we're undergoing today. The other items were supporting downtown housing, supporting the retail environment, helping transition, and looking at adaptive reuse and business interest, specifically the co-work spaces and higher education uses in our downtown. So that's just a quick overview, and I am here to support this collective effort. As you all recall, kicked off this advisory committee's work efforts while we were onboarding Ms. Harris, and was the principal party kind of leading the State Street visioning effort with the State Street subcommittee that generated this formation of this body. So I do have some background, and then my previous role was economic development manager for Santa Monica. So I now have been here long enough that I interchange Santa Monica for Santa Barbara, which is appropriate. So I do have experience with one locally known pedestrian street, which is 3rd Street Promenade, and have experience there. So we'll add in and provide comment to that when appropriate through the process.
Mr. Chair, so you heard when I signed in 2 hours ago and made a few comments, that my comments specifically went to the economic health of State Street and how we can promote and enhance that through the planning that we're doing. And I would certainly like to have the support of the economic development manager to our group and constantly be prodding us to make decisions that are going to work for the retail and the business component on State Street, as opposed to just the aesthetic component. So with that in mind, you can schedule your next meetings accordingly. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks, Ed. Jason is an integral part of our planning team. He will be at every meeting, as I understand. And yes, for sure, he will be here all the time. And I know he will be prodding us best he can. You bet. Anybody else right now? Go ahead, Jason. You want to make a comment?
Well, I was just going to add, no, I appreciate Mr. Chair and committee member Lindvik's kind of cue and response, and definitely I see that my role in that regard, as well as just my experience in downtown revitalizations, not only in Santa Monica but in Phoenix, Arizona, where I was an economic development practitioner for 13 years. I'd also highlight that we have several committee members that have a specific role in supporting businesses and advancing economic development interest in the community. And the two most notable, but there are a variety in different components, but we have two business organizations represented by their respective leaders. Ms. Miller with the Santa Barbara South Coast Chamber of Commerce, Ms. Elander with downtown Santa Barbara, and then just looking at the composition of other committee members having critical roles. Mr. Durling with the Santa Barbara Film Festival, just to name one, that again is an economic engine. And so I think this is really exciting. And obviously, if I was contributing in the earlier remarks of, why is this effort important? It's clearly the revitalization, the economic health of downtown in conjunction with creating an exciting, beautiful, clean, just engaging public space. So with that, I'll end my remarks and available as always to answer the questions and support this committee's efforts.
Thank you so much, Mr. Harris. We're pleased to have you. Mr. Durling, Roger. You're muted.
Sorry about that. Just a pet peeve of mine. Since I'm the film guy and it sounds like we're going to continue meeting virtually, sharing the screen minimizes our visual take, and it's claustrophobic, and also it makes us feel detached. There you go. I would encourage us that as you know, just as least possible, be sharing the screen. Yeah. That's just
don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. Right? If we had an announcement, I walked down State Street the other day and I saw some banner on the Arlington that had something to do with an award. What was that all about?
Oh, forget about it.
Oh, come on. We got to celebrate these kind of things. Roger, tell the group.
Oh, it was just the United Nations local Tri-Counties chapter named the Peace Prize. But anyway, good job. I'm so excited to be part of this, and the fact that we can see each other bigger is just much better as opposed to just seeing agenda items, you know, in a share screen format. But love you guys.
I agree. Love you too, Roger. Kristen. Muted.
I'm just agreeing, that's all. I'm giving a thumbs up.
Yeah,
I missed the
me
whole
too.
comment thing, yeah.
Me too, you bet. Okay, anything else under this item? Going once? Mr. Saxon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to suggest it doesn't have to be at the next meeting, but during our process design phase, I think an important piece of work for us to do is to come up with a collective set of principles that we want to guide this process for the next however long that it takes, this master planning process. And I think that it's really clear that all of our committee members have lots of experience on different committees and commissions and planning, and I'm sure they have thoughts about what they would like, the principles that they'd like to rest this process on. And so I'd love to be engaged in conversation about that. It could be October, November, December, but sometime during this process design phase.
Good, great suggestion. Love that. Love that. Okay. Anyone else? You know what? I'm going to be out of here before 6 o'clock. Again, we had a full agenda. I really appreciate everybody basically doing what they needed to do. Tava, you
Chair Schwartz, excuse me, Chair Davis, wrong committee. I just wanted to make sure we opened public comment really quickly. I don't know if there's anyone on that wants to speak, but.
Ms. Walters?
Thank you, Chair Davis. There is no one who has indicated they would like to make public comment at this time. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Sorry about that. Okay. Any closing comments? Tess, Eli, Jason?
I'm looking forward to the next meeting. So the next meeting will be the third Monday in October, and we've identified so far potentially talking about a collective set of principles for this master planning process, potentially having Mr. Harris provide an update on the economic development plan, and then also having a discussion around scoping for the master planning process, or for the State Street master plan.
Excellent, excellent. Mr. Jackson.
I just wanted to thank everybody for a really great, productive meeting. As Chair Davis mentioned, we had a big agenda today. We were able to get through it and stay on time. So I just wanted to say thanks to everybody and just say it was nice to see everybody again.
Good. Ms. Elander, Robin.
Sorry, son's starting to get in a weird position right now, but I'd like to consider adding in an upcoming meeting, whether it's next or down the road, to make sure how we're going to outreach to the community, not necessarily during the outreach phase, but how we want to make sure that the community knows about this process and knows about these meetings on the regular, besides just having them noticed on the city site.
Very important. Good comment. Okay. Okay, next meeting is just said, Monday, October 18th, 4 to 6, right? Okay, thank you all again. I thought it was a really productive meeting today. I hope it went well for all of you. Thank you for your participation, and we will see you all in a month and probably in between. So thank you again. I'm going to call the adjournment of the meeting at 5:55. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.